There's an elephant in the room with everything that we do with data analytics and all this Power BI and big data stuff. Huge elephant. We really need to tackle it. Data governance. What are we talking about? Really, what do we mean when we talk about it? Because what you're told and what's often in the books is very different from the reality. So let's have a look at the reality and see what's going on. Hi, my name's Ross, the creator and founder of Geordie Consulting and Geordie Intelligence, the YouTube channel you're watching right now. What we're going to look at today is the missing piece, as it were. And this is the bit that, from an IT perspective, we have to understand and we have to really grasp. Because 9 times out of 10, when Power BI projects go wrong and Power BI enterprise-wide issues come up, it comes back to data governance and not having that right handle on things. The issue is that all too often we look at data governance as an endpoint. So what's going on at the endpoint? How's the analytics using it? When what we actually have to be looking at is that whole life cycle of the data, from the point it's entered, where it's stored, and then how it's transitioned into use for analytics. It's not just about what's used for analytics. Because yeah, it's about what's used for analytics, but that's all about the lineage of it and how it came to be, and actually, is it a source of truth or not? Just as important. What do I mean, or what nonsense am I spouting? Let's cut back and see what's going on with our New York data set. So here we are, okay, New York City's Open Data Hub. This is what we're looking at with our rooftop water tower data set. It's this self-reported drinking water inspection results. We've got great figures. We can see how many times it's been downloaded. I'd love to see that number go up a lot more because this is such a valuable data set for learning how to crunch data. In terms of views, usage, everything about it, okay? So we've got lots of cool, clear bits of information in there to get us started with what we're doing. But what are we reporting against? This is the key bit, isn't it? Okay, great. I want to build a rooftop water towers report. Where does the data come from? How is it collected? Where is it stored? What's the format that it's stored in? Now, there's some things that we just can't answer with this, but there's also some reliabilities that we can possibly guess, but we are definitely missing a step with this. So we are missing what the back-end storage layer looks like for New York City. We can have the form, so I'll show you the form in a minute, and we've obviously got the export that we build the report content from. So you can see kind of customer interaction point, so that's your point of sales interaction, isn't it? What actually goes on, the till information that's logging a transaction within your system. Then you've got the outputs from that we have. What we don't have is that storage layer. Is it in 1 table? Is it in 10 tables? Is there 100 tables? I don't know, okay? But what I do know is that we've got a record that's being added by those transactions, and we have a table that we can export. So that's what we've got. And then from that table that we export, we're building a semantic model. So there's steps that you go through, but you have to recognize the shape of the data or the shape of the interaction is going to be different at each layer. So the customer isn't going to be presented with, here's a spreadsheet, just fill out your line, are they? They're going to be presented with a form of some description that they will fill out. That's then going to be translated into something that can go into a line in a table, okay? Or it could be in multiple tables, like more of a record format. That then has to also be exported, and then we want to use that for analysis based on the best practice for analytics, which is we build a fact and dimension table style structure that results in us having a star schema, okay? So there's not star schema all the way through, and there's not form all the way through, okay? It's the 3 stages of data, just in this simple example, has to transfer through and transition through and pass through effectively for the analytics to be valid. Yeah? Okay. So what have we got? Okay, let's minimize this. Let's have a look at this form. Okay, so this is the form 2-page form that people fill out to report their inspection results. Okay, self-reported inspection result data. So put a year in, so I could put, oh, it's accepted that. So there's validation issues potentially in there as well. Do we need to do something about that? We've got manual entry here for a borough, a block, lot information. Okay, all that stuff is being entered manually. When you're entering data manually, there's a risk that we're going to have issues with it. Okay, we can go through, update the information. These are all informational fields that go through. What's the type of building? How many floors? How many storage tanks have we got? Okay, this is all key. It's really important that we have to be aware of this and be able to understand what's going on. So when we come through to build a solution for this, we have to make sure that we've covered everything off, and then we understand how this is done. So we can see we've got an inspection result. Now there's multiple tanks can be within inspections, up to 15. What would happen if they had 16? I don't know. These are questions that we would need to answer as we went through if we were building this solution from scratch. So we can easily turn and say, oh, from an IT analytics perspective, we're going to build a data model, be perfect, everyone's going to use it. But if we haven't understood the lineage of that data and how it gets to be a point where we can use, we've missed it, haven't we? We can't deliver. So we have to be aware of that. Okay? We've got all the stuff coming through. You need to provide the information about the master plumber or engineer who's gone through and done the stuff. There's information as well about the labs, isn't there? If we're reporting the results, so we go through, see what's going on with these. This is all important stuff, okay? This is what we have to go through and make sure that we put in, okay? And you see how this then translates into what we've got. So we've got that form there. That then comes through, and I exported this as an Excel spreadsheet just because it was easier, just for the sake of this, to this format. We've got a wide Excel spreadsheet, yes, no, all that information. If we zoom in a bit, you can see kind of this is the test results that we talked about. We've got all those things in, lat, long, all that information is there, but how does that necessarily get built? What's happening with it all? So we can see there's a lot going on with this. You know, it pieces together and builds a whole report pack, but we've just got details and clarity that we would need to make sure was consistent. So if we were building this and thinking, right, what do we do? This is where, if we were going to stick in Microsoft parlance or Microsoft's ecosystem, we'd be looking and saying, right, can we build a Power App style interface or something along those lines that a customer can fill in, that's going to validate what they fill in. So pick the building, pick this. This is who we've got as the owner. Has it changed? You know, or you can put in information, say no, new owner, and it would then ask you to prompt you to put it in. You could say I'm the current owner or was the owner last year. It's fine. But you can go through and capture that information, can't you, as you go in and do it. Should we ask the owner to be the one who fills in the inspection results? I mean, you know, the ethics committee that I might be working with might say, oh, are they incentivized to answer honestly? Or are they going to say, yeah, we had E. coli present in our sample of water? Or they go, no, none present. Because unless somebody's going to check the lab, who cares? You know, how do we know? Do they check? Are the spot checks done by New York City, or are they just accepting what's put in on the form? Again, these are where the data cross-check should be. You know, it might be a case of, oh, this lab check was done by Easy Labs. Easy Labs could then be sent an email with, we believe you've done this sample, please update. They could tick and cross the boxes. That would be part of their fee that they charge for the inspection. These are things that we would do if we were looking to more automate and progress this to a more modern solution. They've gone as far as having a PDF. So it's, you know, it's getting there. So you've got definite entry points, but fundamentally there's more to be done. Once we get here, though, we then get into data modeling, don't we? Where we then end up building a data model that fits this sort of a layout where we've got buildings, we've got inspections, we've got the results, we've got the calendar. It's quite a simple star schema that we have. Results is always a difficult one. I've ummed and ahed as to the right way to do this with this data set. It works this way, but you just need to be a bit careful about what you're doing, because you're always going to have to pull results from inspections. So you just need to think through. If we had other connections that came off results, we would definitely potentially have issues with it. But again, this is how this model works at the moment. You might go down the route for the next project and say, actually, we need to change how it is and restructure those results just because we found issues with what that is. And that raises a vital point that you have to remember. The requirements of a Power BI data model will change over time, okay? Especially as they expand and grow. Your requirements are going to change, because your requirement is fundamentally to have quick analysis at the points of requirement. Okay. What does that mean? When you first load a Power BI report, it should load in a couple of seconds. Okay? If you have to put a drill through in, people are more accepting. That can be maybe 5 seconds, because there's an action to respond. So if you want to get detail and you know it's going to go to a database to get it, people are more tolerant of, okay, it's going to take a long time. But that first page load has to be like that. That's the psychology of it. Sometimes even people feel a bit better that a drill through takes some time because it's important. It should take time. Again, the psychology is important. So it means that you might find, as your data sets get bigger, that you end up building aggregation tables. So daily summaries, monthly summaries, that can then be used for most of what's required. And then you have that ability to drill down to the detail if it's required. And that drill down to the detail might even be to a direct query connection, which will be inherently very slow, but it gives that better impression of everything that's going on. And it makes it clear that you can have that high-level report very easily, that's very quick, and you can go explore. And then you get to that point where you're going, right, I've got this small number of sales or something like that. It might be a day's sales. What actually happened on there? Give me the detail, and it will go and give you the detail, and you can have that detail page. So we need to be aware that because our semantic models need to support potentially multi-layered access, we need to be building for that. But if you remember where we were with this spreadsheet, not going to support that, is it? But a spreadsheet can have well over 1 million rows. This only has 65,000. Well over 1 million rows could be in a spreadsheet. We could have CSVs. We could be doing other things. If we go back to our parkrun data set, we've got over 2 million runs and over 100,000, 200,000 volunteering sessions. That's huge amounts of data that are available, compressed, managed, and set up in a way that it is accessible at all levels. So we can go from our top level northeast all the way down to a specific event at a specific location and have that work consistently, and it's quick, it's performant. That's one of those things that we need to be doing, and it's because we've thought at all times what's happening. And if we think parkrun, that data set is all that it is really is location, finish time, position, person. Those are the 4 bits of information that really all we have for a participant. And well, So date, location, time, finish position. That's pretty much all we have, okay? That's all it is. The rest is derived from various calculations. Of course, it'll be stored to say, well, Ross has done this many events. But it is important that we have that. You understand that there's the transactional side, which is what's actually happened, what's going on. Okay, and those transactions are what builds our fact tables. But then we've also got what describes that transaction. Those are the details, those are the dimensions around it. But we have to recognize that analysis is around aggregation, whereas at some point there is that hard interaction that has taken place to build that particular fact, that confluence of the dimensions, which is the fact. Yeah? Do you understand? What's going on? Okay. So let's have a look, lastly, a bit of another example that I want to have a look at with our data model. Okay, so if we're back here, right, and we've got, if we look at this, not on here, sorry, this is our Excel spreadsheet, isn't it? Here we go. So if we look at this, right, fundamentally, we only started, didn't we? We put a couple of measures in, and I added one just for the sake of just to show you it adding in Git. Fundamentally, what you have to understand is the way relationships work is they are, to all intents and purposes, doing the same as old-fashioned Excel VLOOKUPs, okay? They allow you to kind of draw together that information to then aggregate something from here, so something from the calendar table, a month of the year, okay? So like May 2026, we can say May 2026. So filter the inspections table by May 2026 is what we're doing. That's what that would be saying. So what it becomes then important is to be able to piece together some more other information, because we might say, well, what about buildings that are in Manhattan? For there. Yeah? And then one of the things everyone loves is, well, I want a nice chart. Put it on a chart or in a map. Everyone loves a map. Okay? But how do we get all these things to work? So we start coming back here. Let's have a look at buildings. Okay? Step number one, if you want to do maps, let me just zoom in, press the wrong button. So what do we need to do to make that work? And I apologize, this is going to be a bit of an awkward one. Let me tell you, let me get rid of my face and we can take it from there. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit on this so we can see. So what we need to do is we need to flag that particular pieces of data are going to be geographically related. So we've clicked on borough. Okay, so you can see borough now has a little bit of a grey border around it. Terrible, I know, it doesn't really come through very well. If we go over here at the top, we have column tools now, appears, which means we've selected a column. And then here is the important part, this summarization and data category. Data category is what we're going to do. So we're going to change data category to be place, okay? Because the boroughs of New York will be classed as places. We're going to pick place. And that's letting Power BI know that this column of data doesn't relate to anything specific. It instead relates to a place. Okay, yeah, yes, it relates to a place. It does not relate to a name or something like that. This is a place to be used geographically. If we come back over and we do the same for latitude, for example, we can go to latitude, we can come up. I'm going to change this to be average for the summarization, because if we've got multiple latitude and longitudes, we should summarize them as an average, and this is going to be latitude. And then lastly, I'm going to do the same for longitude. Okay, I'm going to summarize that an average. And then here, this is going to be longitude. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out again now. I'll bring my face back. Okay, so we've got that. So what does that mean? So we can now say we want borough, and you'll see it'll bring up a map, and it's going to route those on a map. So they're placed well on the map. We can then say, well, what we want to look at is buildings. So buildings by borough. We could change that and say we want to look at inspections by borough. Okay, you're not going to see much difference, but honestly, there was a difference. If we hover over it, you can see there's been 52,000 inspections in Manhattan. If we went and removed that and put buildings in, you would see there was 11,000 buildings. Okay, so we can see what's going on. There's differences there. We could build more information into this, because we could put, for example, the buildings. We've got those on borough. But what we could do is we could say, well, what we want to do is put them on a latitude and longitude. Oh, move buildings from there. There we go. Let me put that onto a map. Oh, we don't need that. We need to just summarization. Do not summarize. Summarization. We don't want to summarize those. Okay. Okay, so here we go. It wants us to upgrade. I've tried to upgrade and it didn't then didn't show this for this demo, which was annoying. We've got this, and then we could turn around and say, well, we want to color code things by borough. Okay, so we can do that, and we can then see what's in Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, and see all they interact together, how that all interacts. So we can see in 2026, for example, which buildings have been inspected. Quick, easy, effective. But remember, okay, this works because it's flowing through this routine here. So we've said calendar year equals 2026. Buildings are where we're getting the source location to place them on the map. And then have they been inspected, yes or no? And only when those all three pieces of information come together does a dot appear. So this works very well for this. Okay, you know, we could look and see, well, what was done in 2024, what was done in 2020, go back to 2015, couldn't we? Say what was done in 2015, we can go to 2014. See what was done in 2014. When I can click. There we go, okay? So it pieces together and it's following this route that we've clearly got built within our structures. We can see how it follows those relationships. And those relationships are that secret sauce, as it were, for Power BI. Get them wrong and your model complexity goes through the roof. Don't respect them correctly and you'll find measures get very slow if they actually work at all. So it's really important to be aware of what's happening. And this is one of those steps that as you're developing as a Power BI developer, you have to learn. If you are building from I'm a data engineer perspective, you have to be aware that your transformations that you're doing to build tables for analytics have to be tailored around, I'm going to have to support a fact and dimension structure that's going to go in. Is the table I am building for output a fact or is it a dimension? If you don't know, and you are building something geared, something like this, which is perfect, by the way, if you want AI to properly learn about your process, because AI wants every bit of information together in concise, and then it looks for patterns across that whole frame. You'll struggle because that's not analytics. That's a use case for something else. If you're saying, well, we've built the summary of everything, and here it is, a big wide spreadsheet, then your analysts are going to have to say, great, fantastic, we'll take that, and now we're going to have to rebuild a solution that actually works based on the nonsense you built. Because it is nonsense, is the thing. We have to be making sure that that fact and dimension structure are firmly in the wheelhouse of what we are building to produce that gold layer of engineering. I really hate the engineering produces gold layers, the data warehouse gold layer. Deeply, deeply hate that as a concept, because if you read the books, the gold layer is where everything has business context. Business context only comes in the semantic model. So for me, only the semantic model is your gold layer. The data might be fit for gold layer, but it's not gold layer on its own because it does not have the context of relationships and of the other structures that go in to really root it in. This is now a locked down gold layer. That's my view. Okay. Comment down below if you can't. It's rubbish. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay. But I see it all too often that we have, this is gold layer, and it's fundamentally something like it's a spreadsheet. There's not a gold layer because it's not business context aware. It's not ready to be used for analysis. Okay, so it's not fit for gold layer. It shouldn't be what we gold layer. So what do you think? Okay, we've got a lot of high pressure stuff in our worlds of data. Okay, it's never enough to suddenly turn around and say, well, we're just going to build this, we're just going to do that. We always have to make sure that we've delivered. And in many cases, especially in the world of analytics, we always have to be aiming to over-deliver on what we do. And that's what your analyst community will have to do. So if you're engineering and saying, well, our IT team, we're going to build these data pipelines, this is what we're going to do. It has to align with the requirement of the business. And that's the headache that you will find as an IT professional, is that we want to align with the business, but we're under pressure to deliver against a stat that somebody's requesting. But if we don't know exactly what that stat is and how it's all pieced together and what it's built by, you'll struggle. To take the New York water tower dataset as a prime example, right? That spreadsheet, that horrible spreadsheet that I hate and also love because it does everything it should do, but it does it in a way that I hate because it's Excel, and I would far rather come up with a better solution, but this works perfectly, is a direct callback to an issue that I've seen many times in ERP systems, where customers have got multiple rows for the same customer. Yeah, so it might be a case of mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, that the customer has kind of ended up in one place versus another, and you've ended up with two entries that might be completely different, but these are now one customer. You might also have something going the other way, that, well, this customer that still says blah actually means blah, but only because it's a different address. So you've got these IDs that need to be tweaked, okay, so that they can be reported upon effectively. It's not about cooking the books. It's about saying company X spends this amount of money with us. Company Y spends that amount. And when you can't attribute that spending to the right place, it becomes a problem. There's also times where you've got, well, this project for company X is going to be done under a different banner and we need to report it separately back to that company. So we have a separate entry, so maybe for confidential projects, for example, that doesn't get reported in the main set. But then our report that we have internally, we want to know, well, company X spent this amount. We might want to divide it between normal and confidential, but we would want to see what we spent, because we don't care that it's confidential. It might be a different group of team that we've got, and they might be under instructions. This is under NDA specifically with that client, but it's kind of, you can see there's lots of these things. That spreadsheet, that formula, that mechanism, that pattern, to use the Italians' way of using it, that pattern works really effectively there, because it simply reads what you've got, makes it really simple, and you just do it, and then it's there, and you're not having to keep doing it or read something in. It's automatically brought through as part of the ETL process. As long as it's reviewed weekly, monthly, whatever it needs to be done, you're fine. That's the important part, isn't it? We make sure that we understand what's going on. We can set rules, we can do all this kind of thing. Great, easy. But we have to be aware that data governance, it's not just about analytics. If you're not looking at data governance as a whole business process, you're going to fail. And you can't look at it just from the point of inception either, where we just, where do we write the data first? It has to be end to end. It's a huge mammoth task. And all too often I see it fail because it's been focused at one area. We want to make our analytics data perfect. Okay, great. So how are we fixing the process? What? You've got to fix the process to build the data to make the analytics data good. It's not, you can't magically do it. There's a phrase about, I think of many phrases I'm not going to use on YouTube, but anyway, there's one about lipstick and a kind of animal. There's another one about trying to polish certain things that are quite soft and squishy. You can work it out, okay? You have to make the whole thing right to then have that data governance applied correctly, okay? It's even before we start talking about, well, we've got GDPR or things like that to concern about, okay? Honestly, with this stuff, yeah, you do have to worry about those, but you can worry about that as part of that end-to-end life cycle, and you should be worried about it end-to-end life cycle. GDPR isn't just about when we record the data, it's where we store it, it's how we use it, everything. You have to be aware, right? That's the scope that you are picking when you say we are doing data governance. If you don't think it's that, don't do data governance, okay? Don't have a data team, don't do this, don't do that with data. Just start building your data analytics solutions. Make sure legal are fine with what you do, because obviously you don't want to be silly. You need to be aware, but focus that end to end. Until you do that, you haven't got data governance. It's that simple. Yeah, it's not just part of your reporting, it's not just part of your analytics, it's not just part of your process. It's everything. Okay, still want to do this? Yeah, excellent. I hope you've enjoyed it. Okay, leave a comment down below. Let me know, do you agree? Do you think I'm just, no, what does he know about data governance? Okay, we only do this every day of our lives, but let me know. For now though, stay safe, take care, ta-da.